All right, guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about text organizational structures. There are a lot of different types of structures, but we're going to talk about two in particular today. That's sequence of events and problem and solution. So text organizational structures in and of themselves are just different ways in which passages are constructed, and especially with nonfiction passages that you'll see on the Keystone exam and pretty much on any test you take. Particular structures follow very specific guidelines, and they're built in very specific ways, and they have very specific types of information that are presented in very particular ways. So if you know how to identify the structures and you know what information you're looking for, it's a lot easier to identify those answers and answer those questions. So if you understand how those structures are built and what their parts are, it's going to be a lot easier to make sense of. So the first one we're going to talk about is sequence of events. And none of these are overly difficult. It's just good to know what ones they are, what they're called, and how they're built. So with sequence of events, it's information or arguments being constructed in a chain so that the writer can lay out the steps in a process, a series of events, or a hierarchy. A hierarchy is kind of the levels of something, of ranking or what have you. So things like biographies, autobiographies, functional documents like directions, and historical narratives all typically follow a sequence of events structure. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, and that's sequence of events. So make sure when you're looking at these to pay attention to dates and other references to time in order to make sure that you're keeping the events in the correct order. Sometimes, especially with biographies and autobiographies, events might not be grouped chronologically. They might be grouped by category or how important they were to this individual's life. So make sure you're paying attention to dates and other references to time, so you make sure that you're keeping it in chronological order. Some signal words to look for when you're looking at a sequence of events is first, next, last, another, finally, before, preceding, following, additionally. Anything that has to do with time, what's coming after or what came before. Some questions to consider when you're looking at sequence of events as well, because it's not just about the sequence of events. It's about, okay, well, what can I understand about this topic or this event based on the way that it's structured and the way that it happened. So some things to think about when you're reading a sequence of events article. What were the most important events in the article? What is the general order of the events? Why is it important to understand the sequence of these events correctly? Okay, and that's a big one, making sure you understand why it's important to know, not just knowing. The second one we're going to look at today is problems and solutions. Problems and solutions, it presents a problem and several possible solutions. The author may also describe the pros and cons of each solution. Pretty basic standard stuff here. Informational documents such as troubleshooting guides for computers, which don't necessarily exist anymore, but a lot of times when you buy a computer and within the manual, they would give you a list of possible problems, and then they would give you ways to fix those problems. Political speeches addressing nationwide problems. That's always a big one, especially with the election coming up. A lot of politicians are coming out here talking about the problems that we have and solutions that they have to address the problem. Even in the pandemic that we're in right now, a lot of people are talking about problems and solutions to fix these problems. Manuals for home repair also use problems and solution structures. So, fixing a leaky faucet or, painting a wall or whatever, hanging a picture, whatever it might be. Those all have steps, problems that you might face, and then solutions to solve those problems. Some signal words and phrases. Obviously, the problem, the difficulty is, it is possible to, if-then statements, and I'll come back to in a second. One challenge is, and therefore. Now, going back to if-then statements, if-then statements are saying, if this happens, then this is going to happen. Or in the case of problems and solutions, if this is the problem, then this is the solution. We're going to run into if-then statements a little further on in some of the other text organizational structures that we see. And they mean a little different things depending on which type of structure you're looking at. Now, when you think about problems and solutions, you really want to think about the root of the problem. And is this solution going to solve that root, or is it just going to solve the symptoms, right? When you think about someone getting sick, treating the symptoms is one thing, but treating the actual cause of the illness is another. So when we talk about the cause of a problem, we call that the controlling idea. The circumstances or occurrences that are controlling or causing the overall problem. Effective solutions will always address the controlling idea in order to solve the overall problem, right? You can't solve a problem unless you get down to the root of it and address that root. A great example here is the old adage, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for the rest of his life, right? So give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you solve his immediate issue, his immediate hunger for that day. But if you teach him to fish, then, he's able to provide for himself for the rest of his life, and that solves the problem. So it's not just giving people what they need, it's, teaching them the skills that they need to have to solve their own problems. And then, as I said before, there are particular questions you want to consider when looking at a problem and solution structure. What is the problem being presented by the article? Why do people see this as a problem? Because sometimes what might be a problem for some people might not be a problem for other people. What is or are the solution or solutions being presented in response to this problem? And how effective are the proposed solutions in addressing the problem? So now we're going to do two different assignments spread out throughout the course of this week. They're very similar, but one's going to be about sequence of events. One's going to be about problems and solutions. The sequence of events assignment, you're going to choose one and only one of the two articles that are in the sequence of events folder on Schoology. Those articles are called History of the Olympic Games and The Time America Outlawed Pinball. Either one is optional, or either one is available. You can choose either one, but you don't need to do both. Okay, please just pick one. In the attached flowchart on the Google Doc, you're going to list and describe the four most important events that happened in the article, whichever one you chose. Make sure you include any dates or years mentioned to ensure that you're keeping events in the correct order. After that, you're going to answer two questions below the flowchart and then submit the doc through Schoology. Pretty straightforward stuff. For the problems and solutions, very similar type of assignment. Again, you're going to choose one of the two articles in the problems and solutions folder. Just one, you don't need to do both. And then in the boxes on the left side of the Google Doc, you're going to list as many of the problems as you can identify in the article you chose. In the box on the right, you're going to give all the solutions presented for each individual problem that is discussed in the article. You can always add or delete columns or add or delete rows to either column as needed. Keep note, though, while the article itself might be about one major problem, within that major problem are a bunch of different examples of that problem. So make sure that you're listing those examples, not just the one big overarching problem, right? And then, because there are different solutions used for the different individual examples within the major problem. Afterwards, answer a couple questions, then submit the doc through Schoology. Pretty straightforward week of work. If you have any questions, please email me or message me on Schoology or message me in the Google Hangouts. I'll be available.